Now, my next guest, no stranger to the show, Dr. Steve Pieczenik. I'm sure he has a lot to say. I don't think we've had him on since this peace deal's taken off. You can talk to him on Twitter at Steve Pieczenik, and you spell Pieczenik P-I-E-C-Z-E-N-I-K. Welcome, Dr. Pieczenik.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on the show. And welcome to you. Welcome on the show.
Well, let's get right into the first peace talks. What do you think they mean? Do you think they're going to stick?
Yes, I predicted this well into the beginning of his administration, and the reason why is very simple. There were no tea leaves here, and contrary to the savants who wanted to say he didn't accomplish anything, he accomplished a lot. Number one, I've been involved all the way back to the grandfather of Kim Jong-un, Kim Il-sung, who was far more ruthless, and then his father was ruthless. The truth of the matter is that, contrary to popular opinion, Trump has been thinking about this since the 1960s. There's evidence in The Art of the Deal and other correspondence that he had that when he went to the New York Military Academy in New York State, he was trained to understand the dangers of nuclear war. And in fact, when he was there, and I was then at Cornell University, we both encountered the same problem with the Cuban Missile Crisis, where literally you had a countdown of minutes and you didn't know whether the Russians would set off a nuclear weapon or the United States would. So we're both products of a potential nuclear war, which was really paramount in my mind as well as Trump's mind. It was far more important that Trump could act upon this. And from the very beginning, he said something that was very revealing. Number one, he talked about Kim Jong-un in a deprecating way. And if you look at The Art of the Deal, that really was the first signal to me that he was interested in Kim Jong-un. And first he had to deprecate him before he was leverage his assets or the negotiation to the point where he could laud him. The second part was even more interesting. He said it publicly that he'd been tired of the Middle East. We had spent over the past 30 to 40 years an absurd amount of money and time and unfortunate death of warriors, about 7.5 trillion. So he made a categorical statement that I knew would force him to go towards the Far East, towards the Spratly Islands. Now, anticipating this, about 20, 30 years ago, I had written a book called Pax Pacifica, in which I literally had described the potential war between America and China, some of it North Korea, revolving around the Spratly Islands. And at that time, it was only appreciated by a few operatives who really understood it, Jim Lilly, Don Gregg, all CIA experts on the Far East. Then the third element of this is important. It's the CIA input, and I have to give credit to Pompeo and Gina, whom I don't know, but the CIA did an excellent job of putting together the interstices of deals that had to precede this negotiation, i.e. China, Japan, South Korea, several other countries that were involved, and I maintain even Syria, because Bashar Assad, out of nowhere, suddenly stated a week ago that he's going to see Kim Jong-un. Now, that is not serendipitous. That is, in fact, a predetermined statement. So I think Trump is going to have not only a oneer, he's going to have a twofer with the Middle East peace process coming into play using the North Korea model.
So you think he's going from North Korea, because I even said that, will we see him sitting down with Assad, seeing the same handshake and just him getting together and starting the process of talking? I think we're actually making more headroom in Syria, even though we keep kind of meddling in there. But just our hands-off approach overall has helped, I think.
Well, we didn't have a hands-off approach. Let me be very frank. In February of 2018, General Mattis, Secretary of Defense Mattis, and General Dunford, the Special Forces, informed Putin that 500 of their mercenaries, i.e. Russian troops, were attacking our Special Forces around Conoco Phillips, a base there in oil, and our 35 Special Forces and Delta Forces weren't doing anything but stabilizing the area. So there was literally an attack on our forces unprovoked, and General Mattis, Secretary of Defense Mattis, ordered the complete annihilation of the Russian forces, and 5 in 4 hours, 500 of them were killed, including T-72s, 121 howitzers. So it wasn't a peaceful area, but the point was Trump didn't say anything about it. He knew this was essential for him to start from the ground zero and build it up along the lines of Kim Jong-un. What, in fact, will happen in terms of the drama and the play or the narrative is going to be quite different from Kim Jong-un. I think the fact that Bashar Assad, whom I've respected and I had been interrogated by his intelligence 10 years ago, made it very clear to me that he was not interested in war with Israel or anybody else. He wanted to grow his economy, solidify his base, in having known his father, who was a far more ruthless man. But ironically, the Ba'ath Party and Hafiz Assad came in with the help of the Israeli Mossad under Eli Cohen, the famous spy. And these are the twists of history that nobody talks about. So I think that will come to the forefront whenever Trump wants it to. I don't know who else is engaged, but I'm sure General Mattis, General Dunford will be part of that coterie.
Well, it's very interesting times, and we didn't see this type of hand reaching out from Barack Obama. Even Dennis Rodman alluded to that when he came back from North Korea 5 years ago. He said he was trying to meet with Obama, and they had wanted nothing to do with him. I'd like to get your take on that when we come back, and also get into the economy. I've got a story here: GDP growth to double last year's, charitable giving's up $400 billion for the first time, but also we have inflation on the horizon, and then we have this story of half millennials expect to be millionaires someday. Of course, they believe in this Instagram. Your life is just what these Instagram people live by. So we'll be right back with Dr. Steve Pieczenik to get his take on this and a whole bunch more. Thanks for watching Infowars.com/shows. Well, we certainly are living in interesting times here. And I think nothing else kind of describes that scene than the interview between Chris Cuomo and Dennis Rodman, one of the premier rebounders in basketball. I remember watching him with the Pistons back in the late 80s, early 90s. And, this guy led the league in rebounds for 5 years in a row, found himself in 5 different championship situations, goes to North Korea 5 years ago. Everybody lambasts him, tries to come back, and he breaks down, which we played in that report earlier, Dr. Pieczenik, who's my guest joining us right now, crying how he tried to relay this message to the White House, the Obama White House at the time, and he was rebuffed. Dr. Pieczenik, what do you make of that, and do you think we're going to see an ambassador to North Korea being Dennis Rodman?
It might be. Dennis deserves to be ambassador. He deserves a lot of credit for what he did. I want to make something very clear. Most people don't understand that Kim Jong-un was really raised in a very wealthy family in Switzerland. He went to boarding school in Switzerland. So he learned French, he learned German, he learned English. This is not somebody who came out of the wilds of North Korea. The family has a compound in Geneva. I knew about his boarding school because I'd been in boarding school in Switzerland, but unlike myself, he wasn't kicked out. I was kicked out. So from the very beginning in the intelligence service, I made it very clear that Kim Jong-un had a very unclear understanding of America. He understood our media. He understood our basketball teams. He understood everything about America, but he couldn't reveal it. So when Trump knew that, as did our intelligence service. Now, ironically, Obama is a complete pathological entity. It's a CIA baby who, whatever he did, whatever he said was a lie. He was born to an operative, a very famous operative. His mother, who's a PhD anthropologist. He went to Occidental College, which is a CIA kind of dead school for people in Los Angeles. Never went to Columbia. Went to Harvard, but he never had good grades. He wasn't as smart as people thought. He had sexual proclivities that were never described. He himself was really not a thinker. He was not a strategist. He was not a tactician. But the narrative that came out made him say that, oh, this is one of the most brilliant men I've ever seen, which was absolute nonsense. Those of us who knew about his grandparents, his grandmother and grandfather actually worked under my auspices at the East-West Center. So they were in the CIA as bankers. So there was nothing about Obama, that's a Freudian slip, that was real. He had the false flag at Sandy Hook, the false flag with bin Laden, that he killed him. None of that was true. What is true, that is under Obama, we had 29,000 innocent victims killed in Iraq and other places with drone warfare. And John Brennan doesn't want to admit that.
Including a lot of children. A lot of children they killed.
A lot of it, children, a lot of devastation, but nobody mentioned it. So what we have here is the obvious individual who thinks out of the box, a guy like Trump, and they say, oh, he doesn't know anything, he doesn't understand the details, he's too stupid, he's too mercurial. Nonsense. This is a man who, by essence, is very American, very entrepreneurial, and like myself and others, we changed the paradigms, as did Alex Jones, as did you guys, to change the paradigm and the narrative in the world. Now, guys like him create a lot of oscillation. Fortunately, the agency could follow it. It could not follow under John Brennan, but it did follow under Pompeo, which is not an accident because he was appointed because he was #1 at the War College at West Point. And so was Mattis, and so was John Kelly, and so was Flynn. So in combination with our military and a very effective civilian intelligence, I'm very proud of the CIA. I'm very proud of our military intelligence. I'm very proud of the men and women who served in East Asia to make this possible, because this involved a far greater complexity than anybody realized. But the New York Times and other papers don't want to grant him any kudos. I will. I think you guys will. And it is a major mark in the history. I would never believe the day in 40 years that I would have seen a peace overture to anybody in North Korea. And that, for me, was major. And I was involved in bringing peace into Cambodia, where I had to disarm the Khmer Rouge and then create a treaty where I didn't have the support of the President of the United States, that was Bush Sr., or James Baker, and instead I had the support of the CIA, military intelligence, DIA, and the people with whom I worked on the ground. And that's the way treaties become. And you keep it quiet. You don't have to put your narcissism in there. But Trump did, and that's part of his modus operandi, and it works. And guess what? There's going to be more and more peace treaties. As for the economy, he has done a brilliant job. The reason inflation comes in over the spectrum is the Federal Reserve always gets concerned when we have a liquidity problem, when M1, M2 are too great, and we have unemployment that's its lowest rank. We have GDP that's growing at a very great rate. So they're concerned that the inflation problem will come on up, and so they're thinking about 25 basis points, which is not a lot for us right now. But the markets, ironically, did not respond to North Korea as it did to the uncertainty of the 25 basis points or more, and whatever it is that the Federal Reserve is going to say about the future. And that's one of the concerns we have in the business community and in the stock market.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I wanted to get into. How much of this is Fed manipulation of the, the interest rates are going to go up, inflation is going to go up, and it does kind of eat away the wages. But, Trump's saying, this is in a CNBC article, he's saying he wants to push it as high as 6%. Right now, they're tracking it at 4.6% gain. I mean, we're almost there. And people were saying it couldn't get over 3%, and it never did under Obama.
Well, you have a point. 6% is a pretty hefty growth for us. I mean, even 4.6%, because we can't find the necessary workers we need. And in fact, at the senior-most level, we're having problems filling that position. What's going to be interesting is really the effect of the tariffs on Canada, which I believe should have had tariffs on it. I lived in Montana, and I watched the Canadian lumber going right through Bozeman, while we, in turn, in Montana had more lumber than Canada did, but we never could ship it into Canada. At the same time, I watched the Canadians flood our markets with milk and wouldn't allow our farmers, the dairy farmers. So we have a very serious problem with our farmers. We have fewer than 2% of our population involved in farming. And part of that is Canada's manipulation of their milk system and the way they supplement it and the way they manipulate prices. So what Trump did was exactly correct. Trudeau is ineffectual. His father was ineffectual. Canada does not stand as a polite, decent country. I found it to be more of a parasite. I found it to be really always saying, why don't you guys go ahead and do the military work and we'll just come behind you. And when it came to peace treaties, they would send 1 or 2 people along with me, and I refused to accept them. I don't think Canada is a serious country in itself. I don't care about it. I lived in Montana. I saw the abuse that we took, both in the milk industry, the agriculture business, and the timber business. So I don't care about Canada. Macron, he fooled himself. I said he was a manipulator. I said he was ineffectual. I said France would have serious problems. Macron played out his card, but he wasn't as smart as Trump was. And at the same time, Angela Merkel has got to leave. She's too old. She's too antiquated. I had a lot of respect for her. She's a PhD in nuclear physics, but they need a new woman, a new presence in a new Germany, because Germany will dominate Europe. There will not be the euro. I predicted that 10, 15 years ago when I said Catalan will secede from Spain. It did. London is doing the same. Italy is pulling out. Portugal will pull out. And the euro is nothing more than a fancy way to hold all the European countries captive by the Germans, because basically the Frankfurt Bank is the one that determines the value of the euro. But if each country had their own printing press, like Italy would have the lira, they could print their way out of inflation or deflation. But they decided not to. At this point, though, the five-star movement is a very important movement in Italy, and I support it. So the breakup of the EU is going to be important, and Trump understood it, and he initiated that breakup. So I go along with him as well. There will be much disturbances. There will be much what we call turbulence, but it's part of the evolution of our history. And we're working at a much faster rate than before with the nature of the internet.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's been dizzying, all the things that are happening, especially over this past weekend. We had the G7, we had a NATO conference, and we had the Bilderberg meeting. In fact, can you hold over for the first 5-minute segment? We can talk about the Bilderberg meeting, because like you alluded to, I think they were choosing the next German leader at Bilderberg. A lot of other people have been speculating that, and Russia was on their itinerary. What does that mean? NATO's meeting at the same time, and the G7. Were there worldwide globalist conference calls going on? We'll find out next from Steve Pieczenik, joining us via Skype here at the Infowars.com Central Texas Command Center. Thank you for watching, everyone. You're watching the War Room, Infowars.com/show. All right, we're back. Got some bonus time with Dr. Steve Pieczenik. I want to pick his brain on Bilderberg. And also, we have some breaking news. I guess the AT&T Time Warner merger was approved. I want to get his thoughts on that as well. Let's start with Bilderberg, Dr. Pieczenik. Do you think that they were picking a new prime minister for Germany in there? We know the past king-making of Bilderberg. And also, do you think NATO was also going to try to provoke some sort of conflict with Russia to kind of derail any sort of mending of the fences?
I don't think either one's going to be very viable. Number one, NATO is nothing more than an expanded American military force. As Trump correctly said, most of our so-called allies never allocate the right amount of money or the appropriate amount that they need to. So from my point of view, NATO's just American forces with a few straggling alliances, not of great significance. The second part, in terms of the Bilderberg, those days are gone. Angela Merkel has to deal, in fact, with her own country. The country's changed. Angela Merkel made a very big mistake when she allowed 1 million immigrants to come in and flood Germany, despite the fact that Germany may have had a crisis of the conscience because of World War II. It really allowed itself to be in the process of self-destruction. So what's really happening in Germany is the right wing will come in and probably displace Angela Merkel, as it has in Austria, and then they will refuse to have any more immigrants. Now, let me make it very clear. I'm an immigrant. It took 6 to 7 years for me, my father, and my mother, my father being a doctor in the French army, to come to the United States. We did not come immediately, and we did not come with open arms. We came, we had to prove ourselves, and there was a timeline. So this time-tested notion that we accept everybody and anybody is not true. After World War II, we had a very stringent policy of whom we wanted, and we wanted to make sure that those people who were coming in were either physicians or academicians or could add very positively to our country. It's not just a country to everybody and anyone. It's a country in which you have to be able to give something to it. I was proud to serve it. I wasn't born here, so I was proud to be drafted and serve in the military. I never took my full commission, never took my pension, but I was proud to say I was part of the military, part of the intelligence, and I still am. So that notion that you owe something to this country is not clearly deliberated or delineated from our presidency or elsewhere. In our schools, we're not taught to really give of ourselves to this country. We're taught we can take, we're taught that we're owed, but we're never taught what we owe this country and what we have to do to serve it. In Israel, the one process I really enjoy very much is the fact that it's mandatory service. Women, men, you have to go in. I believe.
Yeah, it's like that in Switzerland, too. They have mandatory gun training, too, which I think is great because we should be training our young people how to use guns. But we got like a minute left. What do you think of this new AT&T Time Warner merger? Now
I'm in the content and the TV business. The truth of the matter is what you have is a distributor buying up content, and they're competing with other distributors with content. It doesn't make it more effective. What it makes it is bigger. It's more awkward. And what will happen, my prediction is you will get a new company that will start de novo somewhere like, the way email started or Gmail or something else, another content company, and it'll move right out and very quickly surpass mergers. Mergers are not very effective. AT&T is an old company. Time Warner were my publishers. That's an old company. The distribution on HBO is old. It's antiquated. It has the Hollywood framework, which isn't really very effective. This year on the Emmys, of the Television Academy, you had to watch over 300 shows, most of which were junk. So what you're producing in content is really junk, and it's not improving the quality of these companies. It's really degrading the companies. If they want to
more people are interested in watching a kid do something in real life with his cell phone than they are with these multi-million-dollar productions. Thank you, Steve Pieczenik. Thanks for your perspective. At StevePieczenik.com. You can follow him on Twitter. You're watching The War Room. Roger Stone's up next.